Well, again, thank you very much for your time. And in the interest of full disclosure, I wasn't able to read as much of your novel as I wanted to. I had something come up, an opportunity to give some testimony before Congress last week, so that really bit into my time.
It's a hell of an experience.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Mm,
And anyway, what I did read of your novel, No Man's Land, I very, very much enjoyed. Beautifully written
good.
novel. Um, and one thing I did want to ask you initially, how do you classify this novel? Would you classify it as a thriller, or do you see it as something different?
I used to write thrillers, John.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started off, I was a criminal law barrister,
Mm-hmm.
with the wig and gown in England when I started off, and I went from there into writing courtroom dramas and thrillers and crime books mainly. So No Man's Land is not a thriller.
Mm-hmm.
No Man's Land was an intentional departure
Mm-hmm.
from the books that I've been writing before. Um, and I think it's either historical fiction, literary fiction, these genres are all, but the idea is that the story is being carried forward by the characters and what happened by them, rather than the characters being the servants of the plot.
Mm-hmm.
So they characters live in a really three-dimensional way, and you're invested in them and care about them.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I suppose it's trying to achieve, whether it does or it doesn't, is to transport you back to 100 years ago into another world and make that real to the reader. So I suppose it's historical fiction, literary fiction, character fiction, but it's not a thriller in the same way, which I take as being, you need to find out what happens from the point of view of the plot, which is what I used to write before that.
Mm-hmm. Well, the plot's very compelling. I mean, similar to the way a thriller's plot tends to be very compelling.
Mm.
You already answered a question I was going to ask you, whether it was more of the historical narrative that drives your novel, or rather the characters themselves. So you've already answered that question. But the thing that struck me initially, especially with Daniel, the father character,
Mm.
you have him written as a socialist, atheist, as someone who is not a successful man, who comes to realize really, really quickly, of course, through some tragedies that unfold very, very quickly in the beginning of the book, that he's put his politics before his family. Um, is that something that you were looking to? Well, I mean, it is obvious in the beginning of the book, but is that something that you wanted to write throughout the book? That I.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really interesting to me because it was a period leading up to the First World War, which is obviously the centerpiece of the book,
Mhm.
in which there was, people forget this, England was really riven by industrial disputes
Mhm.
right across the board. They were headed for a general strike. And the last thing, everybody thought that the economic situation and the situation in Ireland was what was going to kind of break the country. And nobody saw that what was actually happening on the corner of a map in a obscure place out in Bosnia Herzegovina was actually going to pull the whole thing apart. But yeah, it was a really important facet. But I thought it was an interesting way in to Adam's experience, because what has happened to Adam, Adam's father, is that he, as you say, was a socialist firebrand, and he went into a strike, a justified strike, because they were being asked to work in the building trade in extremely dangerous conditions without scaffolding and everything. And he then his that drags his family into debt and disaster. But there is a fundamental misunderstanding which is critical to the whole way in which the book is structured, because the cousin that he finds work with, because it's very difficult to find work up in the north of England, actually wants him because he is a union man. He
Mm,
is somebody who has a history of, if you like, strike action and class warfare. But in fact, he doesn't understand that Daniel is burnt by his experience in which his mother, his wife, Adam's mother, has
mm,
lost her life.
right.
So what he is getting when the guy comes north is something very different from what is there, and that leads to a whole tension in the mining town, in a
Mm,
sense that Daniel has sold himself as something that he no longer is.
mhm. Let me ask you a little bit about craft, about your particular approach to writing
Mm.
novels. Um, is this something that you set aside? Well, do you plan the novels out? Like typically there are two types of novelists or seat of the pants type of novelists. There are novelists that are much more structured in their approach. Are you a much more structured individual that creates a detailed outline or something more brief like an executive summary? Or do you simply write and let the novel develop organically?
No, I can't write the kind of books that I do on the basis of what your last idea was. It just doesn't work. As I said, I was a lawyer in London, and
Mm,
I think that my legal training really helps because it's like putting together an entire brief, if you like.
hmm
And so it's highly structured. The difficulty is if you overstructure the outline, it's
mm,
like my mother was a sculptress. If you
mm,
create, you're creating what she used to call an armature,
hmm
which is like the bones without flesh,
Right.
becomes a guidance. So it's guiding you as to how the story is going to develop. But if it's too rigid, you can't actually build and too overdeveloped, you can't put the flesh on it as it goes. And so, yes, in the first part of the journey, I create a quite detailed synopsis. I suppose it would be between like 10 and 11 pages,
Mm,
maybe, anywhere between about 5,000 words. And
mm,
also, then I use that in order to get the agreement of the publisher about what I'm going to write
mm,
so that they don't have any crazy surprises. And then I have put some research into creating that outline, but even beyond that, there's an enormous amount more research that needs to be done beyond that. In my books, as I've gone on, and No Man's Land wasn't in my last, but my last two books, the actual amount of research, historical research, exceeds the actual writing time.
mm,
So that can take a long time. And then it's a question of following the roadmap that
mm,
I've created in order to, execute the book.
mm.
Um, and so then there's editing at the end of it. So it's kind of four stages, and each of them is kind of like an agony. It's because you don't know whether you're going to get through it and you
Right.
don't know whether you've done it properly. But as a writer, the key is, I don't know what your other guys say when
Yeah.
they interview with you, but you do develop a kind of inner ear
Mhm,
which you trust in terms of is this good or not? You're
mhm,
self-editing as you go
mhm,
in terms of is the pace right? Um, is it coming alive? Everything like that.
mhm. Well, it seems to be different for everybody. It's not a one size fits all sort of
Mm,
proposition. So I think it depends on the personality and experience and what happens to work for the individual writer.
right.
What inspired you to leave your law practice and write full time?
I think I wanted to do something more creative.
Mm,
I think that I kind of suppressed it for a long time. I don't know whether being the grandson of Tolkien,
sure, yeah.
is was a bit of a factor in that. Like, how can you do something creative when he's done something so amazing or something
Mm,
like that, holding me
right.
back? I think there's probably an element to that. I think there was to be honest, John, there was a wish to create an identity of my own.
Of course.
When the Peter Jackson movies came out, there was this sense of who am I? Am I just the grandson of J.R.R. Tolkien, or
Hmm
am I somebody in my own right? And that really
hmm
mattered to me,
hmm
that I should create something in my own right. So I think all these factors, but I think it was really curious that I'd never actually written any fiction at all before I got to the age of 40, which is
Hmm.
unusual.
Hmm.
And I think that was a lack of self-belief. And I think kind of like a kettle boiling up inside me,
Hmm.
it kind of like earthquaked out, if you like. And then, I began. But when I began, I was very uncertain. That's why my first books, which are crime books, are courtroom dramas, because I was a criminal barrister, so I knew about how people spoke in a courtroom. And that gave me the confidence to be able to write dialogue. But after two books, I wanted to break out of the
Hmm.
courtroom drama, and it become where it was began by giving me I mean, looking back in hindsight, a level of confidence. Afterwards, it felt like a kind of stranglehold. And
Hmm.
then I'd always really loved history. I mean, I don't know about you, but history to me is the idea of bringing the past alive has always been kind
Hmm.
of magical to me.
Hmm.
And more, my books came to be set in past times. And then I was still having the crime, but without the courtroom drama and the police, but it was becoming more political, and
Hmm.
also it was becoming more historically set. So
Hmm.
the one before No Man's Land, Orders from Berlin, which is about a plot, which you might enjoy actually, which is about a
Hmm.
plot within MI5 to kill
Oh.
Churchill and change the originating with the Nazis. And it was quite fun because in Orders from Berlin, I brought to life Churchill and Hitler and Himmler and Heydrich and
Oh,
all the,
very
main
interesting.
players, and tried to
Hmm.
make them real. And the idea was being that if you kill Churchill at that particular moment, you would have changed, just like kind of in the remains of the day, the
Hmm.
course of history, because England would have made peace with Germany and
Hmm.
everything would have been different, and the world would have changed. So that was really kind of interesting. It was trying to make what a policeman was doing in investigating a crime actually change the world, because it ultimately led
Hmm.
to uncovering the plot that was there to kill Churchill. So, I mean, but that was very different. That was extremely plot orientated. And to go back to your question, if you have a book which is incredibly plot orientated, then you can't have a loose framework
Hmm.
I've described. You've got to have each hinge working really well
Hmm.
and being believable, if you see what I mean. So it's a different kind of thing. No Man's Land is a different book, and it's also twice as long. I mean, it's a long book.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
wanted it to breathe.
Well, and this is the first book that I've read of yours, and this won't be
Mm.
my last for sure.
Oh, thank you, John.
And the one that you described before this sounds really interesting. I spent my
Mm.
career in law enforcement, so that
Yeah.
was something definitely I'll pick up and read. But the length of this book, obviously longer than most books I tend to see today, commercial,
Mm.
offerings. How was that with your publisher? Was that an impediment? Was that a question your publisher had about in terms of the length of this novel?
Um, the publishers that I had who'd been quite loyal to me were only in the UK.
Mm,
And so then I had to find after, and so when I finished the book, I had a UK publisher,
hmm.
HarperCollins, who also published my grandfather's books. But then I suddenly realized it was kind of scary for my agent, because she needed to sell the book and it was 210,000 words long, which is twice the normal length. And she found it really difficult. But there was a lady called Nan Talese, who was one of the sort of major, she'd had her own imprint within Doubleday for a very, very long time,
Mm.
published a lot of famous authors, Margaret Atwood, Peter Ackroyd, and everything. And she read the book and fell in love with it, so I got lucky. But then I committed the cardinal sin of not learning from my mistakes, because after I'd finished No Man's Land, I wanted to do it again. And so the next books that I wrote one big book, and I'm just such a crazy guy, I guess. I made it 293,000 words long. And I started by writing about the Spanish Civil War.
Mm,
But then I wanted to know about the Americans who fought in the Spanish Civil War, who
mm,
were the Lincoln Battalion, who went over there and fought there. And then so it turned into a book in which I described all of New York and the labor disputes in New York in the early
Mm,
part of the 1930s and the Great Depression, and then his experience of Spain before the Civil War and the Civil War itself. And then the book itself, I guess I'm quite politically interested, became a kind of analysis of and history of capitalism and communism and anarchism in
mm,
the 1930s and all these isms that
mm,
people believed in so strongly and which kind of turned to dust, very much on the line of George Orwell's journey,
mm.
who began in Spain but ended up with 1984, which to me is such a seminal book and is really
Right.
the kind of inspiration book for these books. So then going back, this is kind of a way of answering your question, is that I then had written this 293,000 word book, and my agent said, I can't. I can't do it. And eventually, I found a public. I went with Lake Union, who are part of Amazon, because the lady there said, "Well, the way to do this is we'll make it two books,"
Mm,
and so it became what is called a duology, and
yeah.
I was able to get away with it. But so I've done it twice. I've done it once when it was really, really pretty bad, and then I've done it again when it was really, really, really bad. And I'm not going to get. It'll be third time unlucky. So no more books of that length. I'm going to write books in future which are 100,000 words, and I'm not going to play with fire in this way. And I've been through a lot of agony of, is this book going to get published because it's so long? But
Right. Hmm.
and then part of the problem is it's so long is that you've invested or I've invested so much of myself in it.
Hmm.
And like with the most recent ones, they become a complete portrait of a decade. And the idea that it's going to sit in a drawer is just unbearable. I mean, it
Hmm.
actually sort of drives you to have suicidal feelings in a
Well,
way,
I
because
would
I mean,
hope
the No Man's Land took 5 years or 4 or 5 years. The
uh-huh.
most recent one took 7 years. So can you imagine? You've put all of your identity and
Certainly, yeah.
into this, and no one's going to see it.
Hmm.
It's like unbearable. I mean,
Oh,
it's quite
yes,
untenable. If you see,
I
I don't
can
know if you've come
relate.
across things in that in your life when you've put so
Of
much into
course.
something and you don't know whether it's going to come through. So I feel very, very lucky that they did.
Well, I'm glad that they did. I like a meteor book. I like a book with with substance. And
Right.
what you have done, and kind of going back to the historical fiction stuff, you've given that era new life.
Yeah.
In
Try to.
terms, yes, in terms of what you've done with this novel, and I've been very impressed with that, and have really enjoyed that aspect of it, in the way that you have brought, especially something that's is foreign to American readers, I would think, that particular era in the UK, or in England.
Yeah, and I mean the new books were kind of interesting for me because
Mm.
since No Man's Land, what I wanted to do after No Man's Land is because I emigrated to the States in 2008,
Uh,
which was a big change for me, is I wanted to write from an American perspective.
mhm.
So the new books are about an American boy, and it's about New York and all the rest of it. So
Did you immigrate because you wanted to write from an American perspective?
no,
Or
no, no, no,
okay,
no.
okay,
I immigrated because
that's
I like
quite a
America
commitment.
more than England.
I'm sorry, you immigrated
I
because.
immigrated for a variety of reasons,
Oh,
but one of them is I vastly prefer America as a country
okay,
to England. I like the idea that everything should originate or try to originate with the people
yeah. Mhm.
instead of with a established and
Mhm.
class.
Yeah. Hmm. Well, I'm glad you feel that way, and I'm glad to have you here for
Mm.
sure.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Um, Let me ask you one of the questions I had written out that came to mind. Do you see the First World War as a
Mm.
moment when Western optimism finally broke, or merely when its fractures became impossible to ignore?
Well, the answer is in a way in what I just said was saying before,
Hmm.
which is everyone thinks of the 30s
Hmm.
as a period of um, despair, in America, the depression and kind of relieved by the New Deal and everything.
Hmm.
But there was so much fervent belief that the world could work out.
Hmm.
The whole, it's hard to go back, but the extraordinary way in which people were taken in by Stalin in
Hmm.
the early part of the 1930s and actually believed in the which you can kind of understand in the context of just how bad things were in the early part of the Depression, that a communist paradise could work and the hold that had on the intelligentsia on both sides of the Atlantic. So I think that kind of does to some degree give the lie to the idea that no one believed in anything after the First World War.
Hmm.
But there was certainly a sense of those who had participated in it that it couldn't happen again.
Hmm.
In my new book, um, there is very much a tension between the son who goes to fight in Spain with the international brigades, with the
Hmm.
Lincoln Battalion, and his stepfather who has fought in the First World War and doesn't want to talk about it. But
Hmm.
eventually he does talk about it and says, war at that level is stronger than flesh. Guns are now at an industrial level. There's
Hmm.
nothing you can do. This is the level of trench warfare. You're not going to change the world. You're just going to die, and you're going to
Hmm.
die in a really anonymous way in some foreign field that you won't even be remembered in, churned up. And so I think my books, No Man's Land and the new books, are very much about 20th century war and this idea that people believe that they can change the world through its agency,
Hmm.
which I think was, fell apart. But the people did believe in the 30s. It did lead to complete dissolution. So I remember an extraordinary passage in my research for the new books where, you know, this guy was talking about being a communist in the 1930s, and he talked about that they had actually talked about the name Passchendaele, which was the worst of all the battles in the First World War, and he would roll the syllables round in his head because it had a certain magic. Even the most appalling, dreadful things can seem like, you know, a wonder.
Hmm.
So I don't think it broke Europe, but it changed everything in a very dramatic and unexpected way. And what is, I think kind of a despair is the fact that, within 20 years, the place was tearing itself apart again, which doesn't really testify too well to how well they did at Versailles. I don't know what
No,
you think about that.
right. Well, that statement that you made with regard to, some of the most horrific things almost taking on a poetic aspect, it reminds me
Right.
of something that George Washington said
Mm,
when he said that he found the sound of musket balls in the air to be, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, to have a charming sort of quality.
mm.
It's interesting
It
that
ultimately leads to Robert Duvall in Apocalypse Now, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah,
The
that's right.
napalm and all the rest of it. Yes.
That's exactly.
But these books are war books
Hmm.
in a very strong sense.
Hmm.
In the same
Well,
sense, in a way that The Lord of the Rings is a war book. These are war books. They're about what the effect of war is on young people. When I grew up in relation to No Man's Land, when I grew up in the 60s, the
mhm,
wars were still there. And all the English villages, I grew up in an English village, you had the war memorials, and they were, the number of people in these villages who died in the First War was just absolutely incredible, far
mhm,
more than the Second War, absolute decimation.
mhm.
So that was very much something that was in my mind to try and understand what an extraordinary experience that was for England.
Have you watched the show Peaky Blinders?
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
seen.
that touches on some of the same ideas that
Hmm.
World War One just absolutely decimated an entire generation, and as you're saying, unlike World War Two, it,
Well, and also led people to be like smashed up mentally. I
Yes.
mean, I suppose that in a certain sense, the appalling behavior of the Peaky Blinders gang in Birmingham
Right.
is attributed to the experiences that they've had in France.
Hmm. Right. Well, you say you grew up in a village in the 60s. Yeah, the Vietnam conflict was very impactful, not just for my family, but of course for the whole country. What was
What
your
happened to your family with it?
my father-in-law was a Marine in Vietnam and was gravely injured. He passed away about 2 years ago, but carried that war with him.
Right.
A successful man. He never allowed the PTSD to overcome him or to dominate his life.
Mm,
In fact, he was a pastor of a church for many, many years,
mm.
30 years, I think, 35 years. So, in that way, it was very impactful, you know, in our family. And I'm curious about your perspective. What was your perspective as a young Englishman, in the 60s and 70s with regard to Vietnam? Was that something that you
Well,
thought much about?
I think it was very impactful to my imagination,
Mm,
albeit that it was something that was happening a long way away and it didn't have a visceral effect on me. But the
mhm,
idea that you could be sent to another place,
mm,
regardless of your choice, where the likelihood was that you would die for something that didn't make sense
mhm, mhm,
was extremely was terrifying.
mm,
And I think the same sense occurred very strongly during the First World War, not at the beginning when people thought of war in a romantic 19th century way, but
mhm,
once the casualty lists started to be published and people started to talk about what they'd found in France. I
mhm,
think people became absolutely terrified that they were being sent to this place. And there's a lot of tension in no man's land
mm, mhm,
between the people who are at home and the one guy, Bryce, who is just desperate not to be sent. He tries to get married to avoid being sent. People give him white feathers, which was what was done to people who refused to go over. Women would give
mm,
them white feathers and publicly shame them.
uh,
There's an extraordinary scene in No Man's Land where Adam goes into this. He thinks he's going to the cinema to watch Charlie Chaplin. And suddenly the screen comes up and there are the desks there, and a girl, a really beautiful girl, is singing. And then she sends these girls out through the cinema to get the people to come forward to sign up at the tables. And if you didn't, people were starting to, the pressure on you. You couldn't get out of the cinema.
uh,
So the amount of pressure to go and all those songs, we don't want to lose you, but we think you ought to go, all of
mm,
that. So
mhm,
this idea of having to go when you didn't want to, or when you
mm,
were frightened, or when you thought your life was going to be lost, I think was extremely powerful to me.
mm,
Um, and I felt that at the time, and I felt that about the First War, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to write about the First War.
mm,
Obviously, I read about Vietnam too in this context. I think it's an extraordinary moment in American history in that
I think
sense,
I think that's
particularly as
I think that's very, very interesting that you hit on that in your novel. We haven't had the draft here in a very long time, well, since Vietnam. And
Mm.
so it's very, very difficult for people to put themselves in that position of being, you know, having your country demand that level of service from you. My father-in-law volunteered to go. So he wasn't drafted. Very patriotic, very brave young man to do so. Um, but these are very difficult issues, I think, to discuss, and I think that a novel is one
I
of the.
think they're distinguished, John. I
Mhm.
think one of the difficulties also with Vietnam was for people to want to try and understand, as Muhammad Ali put it in a way, is how does this impact me?
Right.
Why is the safety of my country and my loved ones at stake because of what is happening in Belgium or what is happening in on the Mekong River? Why
Mhm.
why is this? And I
Mhm.
think that the Pearl Harbor attack and the Blitz in London and the Second World War was a much more understandable situation.
Certainly.
We are in this because we have been attacked.
Hmm.
And I think there's a big distinction that people felt between the two. So it wasn't just a sense of being sent somewhere.
Hmm.
It was also a sense of why, if you see what I mean.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. World War II was very different in that sense, in that the threat was
Mm.
imminent. I think people responded differently to that, and perhaps World War I and Vietnam are similar in that way. In that
In the context of the draft, definitely. And of
yes,
course, the funny part is that my book works because, curiously, in the beginning of the First World War, England did not have the draft. They
oh
didn't bring
really?
it in until 1915, the
Mm.
latter part of 1915, and then in a kind of patchwork way. So Kitchener, Lord Kitchener, who was the Minister of War, the country had to find some way to compensate for not having conscription. So what
Mm.
they did is they brought in the idea of the PAL battalions. So what the PAL battalions were was a promise to people, say, if you volunteer, you will fight with your pals. You
Uh,
won't be alone in some kind of anonymous place.
uh-huh.
So this meant that a small town, for instance, Accrington in Lancashire, meant the Accrington pals. They would form a battalion, and your pals, your people from the factory or the mine or whatever would go and fight together. And this actually had an absolutely terrifying effect because at the first day of the Battle of the Somme, on July the 1st, 1916, which is the centerpiece of no man's land, it meant that purely on an arbitrary basis, those units which were placed by the High Command at the front, the beginning of the battle, were
Hmm.
wiped out. So
Hmm.
the effect on certain places in England meant
Devastating.
that one village or one town in one place was kind of unaffected, but another place, almost the entire young population was completely wiped out in
Hmm.
the first big push.
Was
And
was your grandfather a member of a PAL battalion?
no, he,
Oh,
he, he joined the Lancashire Fusiliers,
oh,
uh, but it did mean, I think, I'm not clear, it did mean that he was in touch with a lot of people, but I think that was just, it wasn't a PAL battalion in the same
mm,
way.
right. Okay.
And he was also, he joined much later, which was in 1916 when the PALs were not in the same context.
Oh, I see. Mm,
And as you know, he wasn't there for very long.
right. Um,
But he was there for long enough to see what the Somme looked like. And we can now see it through the dead marshes in the
right.
Lord of the Rings.
Well, I've heard some people opine that his work, The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, wasn't really a commentary on World War One or the industrialization of war. Um, do you agree with that?
No, I don't think The Lord of the Rings is intended to be anything of an allegorical nature
Huh.
or at all. I think my grandfather, and as a writer, I totally get this. He says, I write stories.
Mm,
The story is not intended to do anything other than take you away into
mhm,
another place, which is full of values and conflicts
mhm,
and a world.
mhm,
That the actual point of writing is to create a world.
mhm,
That is the point in itself. It's not to say, and this world shows you that you shouldn't do X, Y, or Z,
mhm,
or this isn't meant to represent, as C.S. Lewis's books do. This isn't meant to represent stuff in our world.
mhm,
But I think he would be the first to say that such an incredible experience, and this goes back to what we were saying earlier in our conversation, as trench warfare, particularly after the beginning of the Battle of the Somme, which went on for nearly 6 months,
mhm,
2 or 3 months into it, that hellscape, which
mhm,
I've tried to bring to life in No Man's Land so you can actually see it,
mhm,
for somebody coming out of the beauty of Oxford and bucolic rural England,
mhm,
must have had, with a wonderful imagination, must have had an absolutely appalling and devastating effect on his imagination
Oh, for
because it
sure.
is the polar opposite of what can be. There
Hmm.
is, as you say, industrialized warfare,
Hmm.
this hellscape.
Hmm.
And on the other hand, there's the Shire.
Hmm.
And so his immediate experience between, in 1916 and 1917, those conflicting elements of the world were brought to him in an incredibly vivid and searing manner.
Hmm.
So I think that they sewed right in. And I mean, yeah, if you read parts of the Lord of the Rings, I think you are reading a war book in the
Hmm.
sense that it's about, in a certain sense, 20th century warfare.
Hmm. If I can go back to kind of the beginning of our conversation, you were
Mm,
talking about feeling the need to create your own sense of identity as a writer, and it
mm,
almost sounded a little bit like I think what a lot of writers deal with was which is this idea of imposter syndrome, like am I good enough? And maybe even more so for you coming from the literary tradition of your particular family.
mm.
Would you describe it that way as a feeling of imposter syndrome?
Yes,
Mm.
yes.
I think
I think imposter syndrome is absolutely right.
mm,
And I've always felt that. I felt that in everything I kind of did in England. I don't. I think this. I don't know why. I mean, it's such a big question, and we've only been talking for a while, John. I don't know you, but yeah, I think I suffered from imposter syndrome, and I think people who come there was difficulties in my childhood. I mean, no, I mean it was in many ways a good childhood, but there was elements there which led me to seriously lack self-confidence. So
mhm.
yes, I think that's absolutely right.
I-
Emigration is the solution. Get away from it. But it also leads to a level of self-consciousness.
Mm,
If you don't feel confident about yourself, and in the direct context of writing,
mhm,
um, self-consciousness is a real problem because you can't write naturally and fluently if you are hearing what you're saying in a way that makes you uncomfortable. So you have to hear what you're saying to be able to write good prose, but not in a way that you're uncomfortable with it. So it
mhm,
can flow.
mhm.
So what you're aiming to get at is very different from what I felt to begin with.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to get out of
The
your
inner
own way,
ear.
so to speak.
Yeah.
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 And it is such a strange phenomena, if you want to call it that, because very successful writers like yourself suffer from that feeling, regardless of how many books they've read or I'm sorry, written. And
Mm.
I always think it's really interesting that it certainly is not unique to you.
Did I write that?
Did you write
Yeah, exactly. I know.
that?
I know what you mean. Yeah.
No, in fact, I was talking to have you read any of Andy Andrews' works?
No, I don't know who it is.
Yeah, my wife is the communications director for him, and he's written a number of New York Times bestsellers, but he
Mhm.
still struggles with that idea that am I really that good? Am I good enough? And it just boggles my mind that people continue.
I think coming to America really helped because you can be who you want to be here, which I couldn't in England. I
Uh-huh.
think I think that really helped. But it's I do think the writing is good. I think I have a lot of confidence in my writing. What is difficult is how can you get your books to a lot of people? And
Well,
that's
that's the
tough,
business
particularly
and the
in an
marketing.
age.
Yep.
I don't know your experience with this, but in an age in which I think, particularly you mentioned longer books
Hmm.
and historical books in which people are reading less and less, and the TV and the computer and the scroll and everything is offering more and more.
Hmm.
And the great joy of a writer is to feel that a lot of people are reading your books, and it's really tough to get to them.
Well, you had mentioned yes, your writing is good. In my opinion, your writing is
Thank you.
good, certainly. And obviously your publisher thinks your writing is good or they
Hmm.
wouldn't be publishing your book.
You feel there are more, what I'm saying is there's more and more people out there who would read, but how do you get to them? Do you know what I mean?
I know.
It's the ability to
Yes.
actually, this is why I feel so grateful for like interviews like you're doing. And it's really hard to, connect out, particularly if you're writing books that aren't exactly thrillers, but are
Mm,
character driven.
mm.
So it's not like kind of an airport book where you can just, it requires the reader to enter into it in a way. Although I think the thing is fast paced, and that's a frustration. You'd like to get to more people, but it's hard.
Well, the days of authors sitting in a cabin and writing books and handing their manuscript to their publisher and going back into hiding are long gone.
Right.
The people that I talk to, they're as much involved in the marketing aspect
Mm.
of their novel as they are almost in writing the novel itself. It's very much a from what I see from the people I interview, it is very much a whole sort of product sort of endeavor. So your activity on social media is important, and maintaining a constant engagement with your readers is important. I don't know if I'm going to get the statistic quite right, but I think if you read 4 books this year, you will have read more books than I think 80 or 90% of Americans, which is a sad
And
statistic.
it's going down.
Yes,
It's
it's
going
going
down year
down.
on year. And I'm writing books which are 200. I've written a book with No Man's Land, which is 210,000 words long, and followed up with one even longer. So, I mean, I'm not making it easy on myself, John.
Well, make it easy on yourself.
No, I'm going to. Next time round, it'll be different. But
Yeah.
I'm really happy that I wrote these books, but it's challenging, as you say. This aspect of it is getting it out and marketing it and getting people to read it is tough. And you feel, how can I get across? And I guess what helps is when somebody like you,
Mm.
picks it up, finds it interesting, and you get to talk about it. And then those kind of things are kind of miraculous and make you feel wonderful things can happen.
Well, just for your information, I actually saw you on Instagram. Had not
Oh, really?
known. Yes, that's where I saw you. I saw you on Instagram. I followed you on Instagram, and then I saw that you had written this newer book, No Man's Land, and there you go. Exactly.
There
So
you go, John.
there you go.
I like Instagram. Do you?
Yeah, yeah, I do too. I liked it better when it was just about pictures. It's not so much it's about the reels and stuff like that now. I think they're trying to compete
I
with.
don't really deal with that. I like the idea of finding pictures that you think resonate, be they from your personal life or out there. I like choosing music that goes with it and then writing about it. And then really esoteric. It could be paintings, it could be
Mhm,
history.
mhm.
I found this, you can see it on my Instagram. I found this incredible thing like last week. It's called the Checkers Ring. And it's a ring that sits in Chequers. You know what Chequers is? It's the where the Prime Minister lives in
Okay, I
uh,
wasn't sure if
country
you were
room.
referring
It's
to the
it was in the
game.
Diplomat. You must have seen the Diplomat anyway. It's in there. And what the Chequers ring is it belonged to Elizabeth I,
Uh,
the Queen Elizabeth. And
uh-huh,
her mother was Anne Boleyn, who
uh-huh,
was executed by Henry VIII.
uh-huh.
And after she was executed, I mean, like in the film with Kate Blanchett, the Elizabeth film, Elizabeth, before she became queen, it was really dicey whether she was going to be executed herself because her mother was a disgrace and always that. So she could never talk about her mother. She always had to talk about her father, who would, can you imagine? Your father executed your mother,
Right,
really weird. So,
crazy, right?
and so she could never talk about her and she never referred to her. But when she died, beneath the coronation ring on her finger
Hmm.
was a ring, and in the ring there's a secret compartment. When you open the ring, at the bottom there's a picture of her as Queen, Queen Elizabeth, and on the top there's a picture of a lady in 1530s dress whose hair is like in the Holbein hair because
Uh-huh.
all the pictures of Anne Boleyn were destroyed after her execution, and it's her mother.
Really?
So you can think of the old, powerful queen all alone, and
Mhm.
but opening her ring when nobody is looking and looking there and seeing her mother.
Uh,
And that kind of thing, I think it's like a sort of electric shock.
mhm.
It's like history is suddenly there and it's visceral and it's like grabs
Yes.
you by the neck. I put it on my Instagram, and it's that kind of thing that just, transports me, if you like.
Well, Instagram is good for that. I wish the algorithms favored that more, but the reels and all the rest of it, the algorithms
Well, the
send.
reels are just endless, like AI and craziness and
No.
everything. But um, I think if you concentrate on just doing your own posts of things that interest you, and and you kind of curate what you look at from other people, it can be kind of fun. I
Mhm.
just I like the pictures and the music and the captions and all the rest of it. But I
Yep.
agree that within
Likewise.
the world of social media, there is an awful lot of places that I don't want to go.
Well, do you have family here in America at all, or is it just?
My wife is American, and
Uh,
we kind of had one of those deals where we spent 25 years in England, and then we said we'd come over here.
oh.
So my son came here when she was 18, and so we've been here like 17 years. So, and then my daughter came when she was 6, and she's
Mm.
like completely Californian. It's like totally California. And my son still retains his English accent and everything.
Uh,
But so no, the rest of my family, all the Tolkiens are in England or in France, and then
uh.
once a week I get on the Zoom just like I am with you, and we run the Tolkien estate using Zoom. There we are.
Well, I don't want to monopolize your time. We've been talking for almost an hour, and it's been an
It's been
absolute
a lot of fun, John. I
pleasure.
really enjoyed it.
Yes.
And the
Likewise.
first thing I'm going to do is follow you on Instagram, and then I can
Please do. Please do.
I'll find
Um,
your page. What is it?
it's
It'll be among the people who are following me, right? I'm not good about
yes.
it.
Or John Nance. I think
I'll find it then.
it's just John Nance. You can
I'll
find me.
find it. I'll find it. Within seconds, you'll find me following you
Okay.
and read all about you.
Well, I'm hopefully given editorial approval, I'll have a book review up at Town Hall within, I would say 2 weeks. I've got a couple other books in the
I
queue.
think you're going to find the war part when you get to it really interesting in No
I
Man's Land.
don't doubt that. I don't doubt that.
The whole Psalm experience is, I mean, I think it does kind of bring it to life. I think that you'll enjoy that. So
Well,
before you do the book review, please get to the.
well, I don't do a book review until I've read the
No,
whole.
I understand. I
Yeah.
understand.
And
It is
I am
very much a war book.
I am very much looking forward
Yeah, no,
to getting to the end
it
of
was
that.
really great to be able to talk, but I think you will find from having talked to you and everything, your background and everything, I think you will find that interesting when
Definitely.
you get there.
Well, I hope hopefully we'll stay in touch and
I'd really like that. Keep it going.
I'll shoot you a link when the town hall review is available.
Town
And
Hall's great. It's really interesting, you know.
yeah, yeah, a lot of good writers over there, a lot of
Very,
interesting
very good. A lot
perspectives.
of interesting articles about, the crazy world in which we live today.
Yes, you can definitely say that, the crazy world in which we live. Yeah.
What was it like in Congress
Uh
giving evidence?
I very much felt like I was a prop doing my part. And the I mean everything I said I firmly believe, I truly believe, but everybody's sort of playing a role. The Democrats were there pontificating
You
pushing
didn't feel
the
they were
narrative
listening
forward.
to you. You felt that it was all
Oh no, not at all.
it had all been written before, and
Of
you were just
course.
part
Of
of the
course. Of course.
dramatis personae. How strange.
Of course.
Particularly when
Well,
it's something one feels so passionately about. That's
well, it is literally a social media product. The hearings are literally social media products in my opinion, because
from what I can see, that's right. Yes.
yeah, nobody's there to win an argument or to convince the other side. They're all there to push their narrative forward and hopefully garner enough sound bites to push public opinion one way or another. I mean, it was a privilege to be able to give a statement and to answer some questions. if you're interested in that, I have all that on my Substack, and you can find that via my Instagram if you're interested in any of that. But uh,
No, I look.
I very much have enjoyed what I've read so far of No Man's Land, and I look
Thank you
forward
so
to.
much.
Uh,
I'm so pleased you liked it and are enjoying it, and I can see
but
that you've had a great deal else on your mind as well the last couple of weeks.
yes.
Been a busy January.
Well, and I look forward to reading more of your work. So,
Yeah, well, thank you. It's been really fun to talk about it all.